Everyone, welcome back from lunch. Thanks for joining us over on this side. My name is Imafidon. I'm a trustee at the Institute for the Future of Work, and I also run an organisation called STEMETS, and I'll be your moderator for this panel. It's a panel and discussion, so all of you have microphones as well around the room. I think as much as we have lots that we want to say, we're wanting to kind of work together on this, come up with solutions, but also hear from you, the audience. That's why we're in a circle, I guess, rather than just up on it. In fact, we're below you. We're sat physically below you, which I don't want to read too much into that. So the way that I'll run this is we'll go through introductions of the panels. I've got a question to ask each of them, and then I know you're all familiar now with the Slido. If anyone wants to go old school as well, we can use the hands that we have maybe on the end of your arm, or the person next to you may have a spare hand. So we can ask questions that way, and then we'll get to the bottom of this, I'm sure. So to my left, I have Professor Sue Black, OBE, who's Professor of Computer Science at University of Durham, and some of you may recognise her as the lady who saved Bletchley Park. I think it's ironic that you're here instead of there today, Sue, just because it wouldn't be standing, whether to sit, if not for you. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, and why is skills something that you're here to talk about today? Yeah, why do you care about skills?
Thanks very much, Anne-Marie. Hi, I'm Sue. I'm, I guess, a computer scientist with a PhD in software engineering. I care about people a lot as well, so I've done lots of things over the years, over probably the past 30 years, to try to bring together communities. So I set up BCS Women, so the British Computer Society Women's Network, which was the first network like that back in 1998, so I can't believe that's 25 years ago. Still running today, and the whole idea of that was to bring together women in the technology space just to share experiences, and the group's gone on to do lots of amazing things, so that's one thing that I've done. I really care about, I come from a background where I left school at 16 and didn't go back into education until I was 26, by which time I had 3 children and was a single parent. So I went to college, then went to uni, and I know that getting a degree in computing and a PhD just absolutely changed not just my life but my children's lives as well, in terms of I was then able to understand what was going on in the world, and also to provide an income for my family. And I've now got 6 grandchildren, and I can kind of see it kind of rippling down the years. What if I hadn't gone to uni? Who knows what would have happened? So I really care a lot about upskilling people to help them live their best life, achieve their potential. So some of the things I've done also are set up social enterprise tech mums, teaching tech skills to mums, particularly in disadvantaged areas. And with like a 10 to 20 hour programme, you can really change someone's life in terms of upskilling them around just very, very basic stuff, which we probably all know how to do. And it's the kind of stuff that Helen does as well. Also at Durham, we run a programme called Tech Up Women, which is retraining women from underserved communities into tech careers. I think there's a massive problem there's massive skill shortage in technology. There are loads of people that want to work in technology, but there aren't very many clear pathways of how to get from being in a different area completely into technology. So we run a program called Tech Up Women, which takes women from underserved communities and retrains them into technology careers, working with industry partners. So we find out what the industry partners want and then create programs to train those women into those areas.
Thank you, Sue. Helen, Milner, you are Chief Exec at Good Things Foundation. Why does skills matter to you?
So Good Things Foundation, we're the UK's biggest digital inclusion charity. We also work in Australia, if anyone's interested in that, doing exactly the same thing there. And we work with over 3,000 hyper-local organisations, so small community organisations, local charities, libraries, Systems Advice Bureau, food banks, etc., etc. I think of it as a big club with a shared vision. So if people on the ground want to fix the digital divide and want to do it together with others, then they can join that network. Everything we do for that community is free, and we're funded predominantly by the private sector. Before the pandemic, we only really did skills. So for us, digital inclusion was about ensuring the 10.2 million people who lack those very basic digital skills. I think that's shocking, isn't it, if you think about it, that we still have such a huge number of people who don't have those skills, to make sure that they have those skills and we can support them on a learning platform. Pandemic hit, those face-to-face places will have their doors closed, and all of a sudden, out of the woodwork, and I hate to so now that's a fundamental part of our offer. So we're supporting 500,000 people with free connectivity, recycling devices from the public and private sector to put into the hands of excluded people, 5 times the demand that we can keep up with on the supply. And so it's really important, and we have the evidence to show that a lot of those people who are lacking those basic digital skills are living in poverty, often don't have any qualifications. So making sure that they have the wherewithal to have their own devices and connectivity that they can afford, because it's free from us, but there's other affordable ways of doing it, can actually make sure that they get those skills. And as Sue was saying, it's really important to see the progression from the basic digital skills onwards. So it's not just to further digital skills, it's to other skills, literacy, numeracy, but also employability, getting into jobs. And so understanding the progression from basic digital skills into other ways that benefits their life and their work.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Helen. Dr. Malaya Sophia, Dr. Magda Sophia, you are our IFW research lead as part of the Pisiridis review into the future of work and well-being. Touching a little bit actually on some of what Helen was just saying there. What does skills mean to you? How does that fit into your research and maybe what we're doing at the Institute? You can hold it like a microphone if you wish.
Is it working?
Oh, maybe it's not on.
Is it working now?
Yeah, technology, eh?
I'm a sociologist. My background is in, I started doing my PhD research in job quality, and then I work on the workplace well-being, so we focus on well-being of the workforce and how we could enhance well-being through better jobs. And now I joined the IFL team to research on this intersection with technology and good jobs and well-being. So as you said, I'm leading one of the 4 work streams of the Pisiridis review to the future of work and well-being, specifically focusing on workers' voice and their own experience with technology and technological transformations at work. Yes, as a sociologist, probably I'm more interested in how we can, in all these structural factors and conditions that can either enable or hinder people to actually use their skills. I'm interested in progressing from that narrative of skills such as static resource or as a commodity. Same with technology. We need to see what factors and what conditions we need to put in place to benefit from them. So I'd like to bring into this conversation a bit more about the concept of capabilities, as used in Amartya Sen's development theory, and how is that different from the skills concept.
Awesome, thank you. And then last but not least, the microphone will now move back to Dr. Wilson Wong, who's Head of Futures, fantastic title, at the Chartered Institute for Personal Development.
Okay.
Skills and futures, capabilities, loads of words that we're doing here. Tell us about the
Yes,
future.
I'm a big fan of Sen's work. So I'm Head of Insight and Futures at the CIPD. Although I'm big on personal development, it actually should read Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development.
We'll get that sorted, don't worry.
So just in case, I'm not going to misrepresent the other Chartered Institute. So I'm actually trained as an economic psychologist. So my interest really is decision making, and my PhD was in how time changes the framing of decisions. So when I started my kind of journey with HR, it was very much as a novice, but I very quickly understood that there were huge areas of research possibilities and a huge amount of work, certainly in the psychological literature as well. And my work there, my research work there has included fairness, and we used some of Sen's work there, the construct of fairness, and how that affects the employment relationship within organizations and the kinds of things that shape people's decisions when they decide to move on, to leave, to withhold labour, and there are different framing mechanisms that affect those decisions. But as head of Insight and Futures, my recent work is more on future work and the kinds of things that are happening to change the deal for human capital. And so today what I'll do is I'll share some of the findings of our latest skills and learning report and the kinds of things that we've learned from our members about what worked for them and what seems to be happening in organizations.
Awesome, thank you. Looking forward to that. So this panel is about reframing skills. Of course, against the backdrop that we're discussing this is looking at the adoption of AI technologies and automation that's caused a shift in the skills that workers across the country need, and also that employers then are seeing reflected in their workforce needs that are changing. So you want to think about how organisations in particular can do better to respond to the shift in skills and also the shift in the skill gaps that are kind of then appearing as a result of the rollout of a lot of this technology. How can we address that skills shortage, but also how can we improve job quality for workers as well that feel these shifts in technology usage more acutely. And I almost always, whenever I'm on an IFOW stage, and even when I'm not actually, end up referring back to the Good Work Charter and this notion of good work, and that learning, support, participation are all features of what good work should look like. And so skills is an important one, not just for folks coming into work, but those who are in the workplace, you know, in terms of what good work looks like for them going forward in this industrial revolution. So as we've said already, we've got a Slido for questions and ideas. Q&A and ideas are kind of separate on the Slido. And also let me know if you're going to raise your hand as well, whether it's a Q, an A, or an idea that you are posing. I want to come back to you, Stu. You mentioned tech mums and also tech up women. The aim for tech mums was breaking down the digital divide through teaching programming, social media, and digital security. Let's go granular, maybe a bit tactical. What do you feel are the new skills that are needed to level up communities in this age of generative AI?
Well, I think most communities don't have basic technical skills, so I think, you know, I started Tech Mums in, I think, 2012, and 11 years later, the same skills are still relevant because most people have never had access to that. You know, we teach stuff like, we start off with, you know, like basic stuff, which is probably quite the first 2 hours, probably quite similar to the stuff that Helen does at Good Things, which is like how to do an internet search and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then go more into things like how to create an app, like just basic app design, basic web design, how to set up your own business online, how to use social media effectively and kind of find your community, how to stay safe online. And so I think most people still don't know all of those things. And so, you know, we can teach that in less than 20 hours. And so what I wrote, I think I wrote an open letter to government kind of on my blog about 10 or 12 years ago, saying that if the government put the investment into putting those courses, even put them online and create a kind of like volunteering program around the UK, we could upskill everyone in the UK with 20 hours content for each person, and we can create most of it online. If we had the support of a community of volunteers, and there are loads of groups like the STEM ambassadors, for example, through just a simple program like that, we could upskill everyone reasonably quickly to a certain level, and then probably we could start thinking about AI. But I think most people still don't have those kind of basic digital skills still. So I forgot what your question was.
Well, no, what are the skills? What are the skills that we need in the age of generative AI? And you're saying it's...
Well, and so now, like, we're going to include ChatGPT in that, so that people know how to use it, and maybe Midjourney. Just so that people can just get to grips with these things. Because what we found with Tech Mums is that once you kind of get people started, they'll carry on their own, but it's kind of a lot of the time, lots of people are still scared of technology and don't want to look stupid. And so I really feel that's the biggest barrier that we need to get over, is to help people to feel confident with technology. And then, you know, once they feel that they've got those basic skills, they can go on and do that stuff themselves. But I feel like we're still not at the kind of like base level of everyone having the confidence and the competence to do just very basic things.
Getting folks into the ground floor, right, before they can kind of head up. From across the panels, are there any other skills that we'd say, in addition to basic digital skills, that folks need in this age of generative AI?
I think that one thing that we're exploring is how do we build in AI literacy into basic digital literacy. So I think I heard this morning that AI is going in as the word of the year. Right? So if it's the word of the year, it means that, you know, whatever media people are consuming, it's all like AI this, AI the other. Which is actually really important for the future of work, because a lot of that stuff is quite scary. It's the robots are coming. So just at the very, very basic level, what is AI? What is artificial intelligence mean to you in your life and your work? We are working with people at that very low skills level, so also thinking about how you're already interacting with AI. You know, chatbots is a really good example. And then what's happening in the world of employment. So when you're looking for a job, your CV may well be screened by a bot. So what does that mean? What new skills do you need in looking for work in an age of AI? So all of those things are very practical and very today. So making sure that, well, I mean, there's a lot to talk about inclusive AI, so making sure that we're not just assuming that AI will be done to people, but that they have a role in it, like, we would co-design such a thing with people in communities so that they can say, what do they think? Maybe they don't think AI is everywhere, right? But actually working with them on working out that curriculum and always involving them. So always involving them. And the other point is, so I mentioned pathways before, and I think that there's digital skills and AI skills. I think of AI as a component of digital skills. It's no one's responsibility to build those pathways. Literally nobody's responsibility. So we did some pilot work in Greater Manchester, West Midlands, north of Tyne, building pathways from community-based, very informal, basic digital skills up to the essential digital skills qualification at FE. So that's like entry level 3, level 1, by the way. And so we found that the FE sector couldn't engage those people that we can engage in the heart communities, but we had to actually build those links, introduce those people to each other to make that one tiny step. So you can imagine if there's, you know, going on to, you know, what you do at Durham or whatever, like who is the responsibility for that? Government investing in loads of boot camps, like whose role is it to reach down into our communities, into those people who never have those opportunities, and make sure that if they are developing basic digital literacy, basic AI literacy, that they can go on a journey all the way up, that everybody starts where they start, providers, and we really need some responsibility taken for making sure that there is this pathway, so that AI skills at all levels and digital skills at all levels can be, that there's a handover, you know, a baton passing between the different players within the different sectors.
I just add a little bit to that. Yeah, so that's really interesting, because that's the sort of thing I've been talking about recently around pathways. And what we found is, for example, with Tech Mums, which is kind of basic, you know, anyone can do Tech Mums program. We've had some people go from Tech Mums then onto Tech Up Women, so the program that we run at Durham, and go from, you know, being not exactly unemployable, but not being able to earn a very high wage or salary, going through both of those programs and coming out the other end, and then like becoming a consultant at Accenture around cybersecurity or something. It's just been completely amazing. And if you create those pathways and connect together, because there are amazing initiatives out there, connect them all together and show people how they can get from A to B, you can make a massive difference in people's lives. And it doesn't just affect that person, it affects everyone around them.
I think it's funny, I think that you've always kind of highlighted a converse set of skills, which is that connecting into communities is definitely a skill that facing me, but also co-creation. You know, we talk a lot about equitable practice at Stemets, and, you know, it's with the young people that we're doing this, and we're leading into the assets that they bring rather than it just being about deficit. You don't know this, we want to fill it in. But I think that's also a skill maybe that's sometimes lacking kind of within the tech world and within the space that we're in, of bringing others in and maybe being on the same level as users and being comfortable with saying we're co-creating with our users rather than we're doing things to users, for users, you know, and around users.
Absolutely. I mean, with learning and skills, of course, you need to start where the people are.
Yeah.
And what better way of doing that than co-creating, right? Because you can't do skills to people.
No.
It's not opening up the brain and pouring it in. People have to learn. This is not about skills, this is about learning.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be done in a way that people are receptive and able and motivated to learn.
Awesome.
Sorry, can I just say one small
And
thing?
then Magda. We could be here all day, but I know. Go on, Sue, and then
Well, that's one of the
Magda.
massive issues with big technology products, being implemented and not interacting with users, and that's why, kind of through software development methodologies over the years, Agile was a great thing, kind of pair programming and also talking to the users a lot more in the development process. But also, lots of things that have gone horribly wrong, like for example, the post office system that we've all heard about recently. People vilified when the actual people producing the software know that it's not correct, and people committing suicide and going to prison because the users haven't been involved in that development process.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I think the question about what skills we should be investing on, how do we solve that skill gap, it's a question that we should actually be asking workers themselves. Sometimes I have the feeling that the question is kind of misled or misguided, and we are very focused on how we can keep up in terms of skill resources and skill pools to satisfy and meet businesses' needs to keep up with the technological transformations that we are, as you said, like as if technology is just happening to workers, but not the other way around. I think the question should be asked in the reverse direction. So which and how technologies can help develop and expand worker skills. Which skills do you want to develop in upskills? What do you want to learn? What do you feel useful? What do you find meaningful? What technologies and how they can augment our capabilities and not the other way around. So it's not just us keeping up with technology, but it should be the other way around. Technology should keep up with our needs. And at the same time, just making sure and asking, okay, so what conditions, what other factors, structural factors, institutional infrastructure, regulations, what do you need to be in place to make sure that actually those resources you've been able to develop, your skills and the technology you've been able to adopt as an employer can actually be converted into capabilities and be put to good use. So yes, I think if we state the question in this way, we are starting to give back workers their agency and giving them the say that they should have in this discussion. So being more involved in the design and deployment of these technologies throughout the process of adoption and not just let's keep up with and what skills we need to pour into the labour market to satisfy and just grow. I think it's the other way around.
So there's a skill in question asking. You've almost described kind of Montessori, but for workers. Maybe it's some way, right? Maybe that's a new approach that we need to take. Wilson.
Yeah. So, you talked about workers, and I wanted to kind of home in on a particular group of workers, which is the leadership. You look at the recent article in The Economist where you had this picture of the CEO being stretched in multiple directions, and you ask yourself now, what are our expectations and demands of CEOs and their team and the senior managers of an organization? We kind of tell them that you need to look at health and well-being, and the list is endless. So what is their capability? What are their skills? What is their knowledge base to running this kind of, to run a modern corporation? And in an upcoming report from the World Federation of People Management Associations, where they surveyed HR from about, I think, 60 over countries, and they said the number 2 concern that they had was leadership development. And they identified that as the biggest gap in their capacity to effect change. So their ability to deliver on leadership development is here, but the need is here. And part of it is because they felt that leaders didn't want to come to the table to relearn, to upskill, and for whatever reason. But also there was no political push for leaders to upskill. And of course they have an outsized impact on not just the operations, but also the culture of the organization. So it's nice to know that workers are being talked about here in terms of voice and so on. But I think there is a question about the quality of leadership that's taking us through this change as well. And you know, they are not especially technically clued up, but they're making huge decisions about the work lives of their people.
I love that, and it's all the different levels of leader. I remember at one point being on a one-woman campaign to get all MPs to pass a digital literacy test before they were allowed to kind of assume position. But it is that thing of everyone has to be moving, workers, young folk, you know, everyone needs to be, you know, accelerating at some pace. There's a question from David Wood. I don't know where David is, if you want to give us a wave. There we go. David wants to know, do the panelists agree that critical thinking is more important now than ever before to prevent us from being misled by careful fakes or conspiracy theories? That wasn't on your list originally. David is proposing it as an addition to our list. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I guess part of my kind of want for everyone to have basic digital skills is so that they can acquire those critical thinking skills as well, and try to grasp reality as much as we all can, in terms of there's a ridiculous amount of information out there coming at you from all different places, and you don't really know what vested interests people have behind it. So sometimes you do, but a lot of times you don't, of the stuff that you see in the media, you know. And so yeah, absolutely, we need critical thinking skills to be able to differentiate between what is reality and what's not, and that's getting harder and harder as time goes on.
Okay, awesome. Any more that folks wanted to?
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing we're quite interested in is how AI can help us with teaching and learning. And so one of the ways in which it could clearly help us is to constantly be diagnosing, if you like, where people are at in their learning and skills journey. And therefore, it's a great question, but I'm going, well, how would I do it, right? So, you know, teaching people how to spot a phishing email or something is relatively straightforward. How to help them build a foundational skill that they're then critically going to evaluate, whether it's a bot or not, as an example, is another thing. But you could use AI in the teaching and learning process, not just with online learning, but with hybrid learning as well, to have a way in which those journeys, the learning journeys for individuals, can be incredibly personalised depending on their understanding at any given moment, to help us to enrich that underpinning foundational learning. And I think that's a real opportunity around critical thinking, because how do you build that foundation level? And particularly, we often look at it, you know, when we've been doing some modules around misinformation, as an example. But for people who have low levels of English, might not be literate, haven't got any qualifications, that everything we do is reading age of 8, is like, how do you explore concepts in an easy way that breaks it down when it doesn't feel very performative, like, can you spot a scam, can you spot a fish? And so, so I think that technology could massively actually help us to diagnose and deliver.
There's definitely a group that's working on this. I'm trying to pull them on AI-in-education.co.uk. And I think it's definitely something to be explored, but also something where we still need to kind of work out the frameworks, the principles, kind of the balance, and being able to balance the risk with the opportunities in using it in education. Wilson,
I'll very quickly respond to David.
Yeah.
I can't say no to your question. I mean, it's a given that critical thinking is necessary. You know, you just have to look at the state of this country. But critical thinking cannot exist in a vacuum. It only operates in a context where there's sufficient security and maturity for those things to take place. Where critical thinking becomes dangerous is when there isn't that maturity. And so you see that these discourses then become threats, and then you legislate against those threats. You only have to see a freedom of speech thing with the universities to see how contentious this is. And critical thinking itself cannot provide the solution when the context is so immature.
Thank you.
And just kind of to say though, it's much more likely that businesses and community sector informal learning could be at the forefront of using some of this AI to help to underpin it, because the formal education sector is so hard to move, like the Catholic tanker, right? So that I think it behoves those of us who are working outside of the formal sector, be in businesses or in informal community learning, to kind of test some of this out.
I'm going to add an extra dimension and then we'll come to a couple more questions and inputs from the audience. Infrastructure. We're talking about it this morning. I don't know if there's anyone else here who was stuck on a train from Manchester through Stockport for half an hour, only 6 miles out of the centre. Helen, you spoke about this as well. During the pandemic, we got to see a lot of kind of that infrastructure, the physicality of a lot of these skills and where that plays. You know, what do you see as the key infrastructure and skills challenges that are facing people in terms of access to work, maybe? In an AI age?
So obviously, I think that communities are the core infrastructure, so like I said, we work with over 3,000 hyperlocal organisations, with their staff and their volunteers. So the human piece of that, and also the physical piece of that, particularly in a world where lottery and railway ticket offices aren't closing, but you know, post offices, banks, etc. That some of that other infrastructure isn't there. It's interesting to talk about access to work, because I always think about life and work as being very closely interwoven. And that, so I talk about community infrastructure, but if we also think about informal learning or even around the technological infrastructure, then businesses could do a lot more. As we also said, I think a lot of the leaders don't understand what more might be, but we do, obviously, if you're in work, you're very dependent on what time off you're allowed to have. You know, like if you've got hourly paid workers, I spoke to one company who had 100,000 hourly paid workers, and he went, well, Helen, you know the cost for us if we give them all 15 minutes off. Okay, right. You know, so, you know, to do learning. And so if you're actually coming at it with that mindset that you as a business aren't going to benefit, then actually that's the mindset we need to change. I also want to say something negative about, I'm going to say like capitalism, because I think that absolutely we need workers to have agency, we need people to have good work, but actually if we keep creating leaders who are always looking at their shareholders and the bottom line, then are they really going to be bothered by the wider societal impact of them playing their part to make sure that people have the skills not only for the work that they're doing today within that business or in the future in that business, but actually for other businesses in that wider society. And so I think we really need to frame that development of skills at work piece within that the kind of concept of stakeholder rather than shareholder, and that obviously has to be not just in their ESG, it has to be across their wider business. So I'm not sure, I'm a very optimistic person, but when I actually think about this, I feel quite pessimistic about it. Just going back to the very basic level, we need to make sure that if people's access to work through employment processes, 92% of all new jobs are only advertised online. So if you don't have those basic skills, and then if you don't understand how you're being selected, if AI is being used to select you, then you're never going to get that job, even if you are online and have some basic skills. But I think it's really important that we understand what those barriers are, and I would say train up and skill the people to be able to understand those barriers, because we're not going to stop it happening, right? So however idealistic we want to be, we're never going to stop it happening, so let's make sure that everybody who needs to know has that understanding of the society that they're living in and how they can access work, and obviously good work.
Okay, someone else on infrastructure that's needed?
Yes, so I think when I think of infrastructure and what conditions are needed to enable people to use whatever skills they've been developing, I think more than just physicality, I think, well, probably as sociologists, they have too kind of loose concept of infrastructure, but it's reasonable adjustment policies at work, is this organizational culture, is training infrastructure and programs and HR philosophy. It's a lot of different levels of rules of the game that can enable to make better use of those skills. There's a the capabilities approach uses a it's kind of a cliche image, but it's the image of the bike. We can measure the level of development of nations by how many bikes we've poured into the market, but that won't mean that everyone will be able to use the bikes, right? So we need to focus on whether bikes are free to use for people with physical disabilities, or if we have the right roads available, if we have the right legislation to allow everyone to ride a bike, etc., etc. So it's all kinds of contextual and structural factors that need to be put in place. And I'm trying to also remember from the focus group discussions that we held in the context of the piece of research we held over 12 focus group discussions with workers from different sectors and occupations, and we asked them, so what things do you need to see in place to feel that you're mastering these technologies, and do you feel that you're adapting gradually to technology and actually benefiting from it? And they're very receptive of technology in general. They're very positive about it. They're very quick at recognizing the benefits, also the negative things, but very quick at recognizing the benefits, and they feel engaged. I mean, they see employers who invest in technology and upskill it as something successful, and that makes them feel more engaged. So they want to train, but of course there's not a one-fits-all training policy. They spoke a lot about differences in learning styles, and how, for me, is more beneficial. Peer mentoring, for me, is more beneficial just to have the printed manual and read it 100 pages at home, just because I don't want to be exposed or come across as ignorant. Oh no, for me, it's just learning by practice, by doing. So different learning styles that need to be put in place. Also communication channels between employers and employees, strengthening information and communication channels. Also to boost that sense of being involved in the process of developing and designing these technologies, being transparent and communicating what the goals are of why are we adopting this technology, and what are our goals, and how we're going to be using it, and what are the potential risks for you, and what are the benefits, what do we expect from it. Just being transparent, and that's all what I mean, part of the HR philosophy and organizational culture as well. So it's information, it's regulation, it's physical infrastructure as well, among other things, of course.
Awesome. Sue, what would you add?
So I think, I'm always going to talk about education. So we need the physical infrastructure in terms of we need people to be able to access Wi-Fi either very cheaply or for free. We need everyone to have access to a device so that they can get online and access what there is online. And we also need kind of educational infrastructure that gives everyone the opportunity to learn, as I was saying before, basic digital skills, because then once they've got all of those things, they can kind of take control of their own destiny, their lives, and they can achieve their potential, whatever that is. And so I'm just starting some work with the UN, looking at digital skills and trying to have a global impact of digital skills, probably starting with refugees in refugee camps. And so, the first things we're going to be looking at is, well, what infrastructure is there? Does everyone have access to Wi-Fi? Can we get enough devices to people so that they can, for example, work or set up their own business? Because there's so many people that are just disempowered because they don't have that kind of physical device and infrastructure and connection to the internet. And also they don't have the basic digital skills to be able to do something about it. And so, we've got so many people unemployed in this country who could be working if they were provided with the physical infrastructure and the the education and could be setting up their own businesses or could be working for companies anywhere in the world. You know, we're operating in a global marketplace now. In a way, there's no real excuse for, I think, for almost anyone being unemployed unless they want to be. So I just think that there's masses of opportunity if we just put that infrastructure in there and support people to be able to do whatever it is with their own skill set, develop those skill sets, then we would actually save the UK lots of money because, and also change people's lives for the better in terms of helping them to become independent.
So it's about building that agency. Also,
I'll talk about infrastructure at two levels. One, I think we've discussed a lot about the infrastructure already, but I think one of the questions I wanted to ask is, you know, so do you have individual agency over my reskilling? Who bears the risk? Is it me? Is it my employer? Is it the state? Is it, you know, the church? Who? Because it's great to talk about, you know, Sana talked about having 4 PhDs in order to function according to the government policy. But who pays for it? Who bears that risk for reskilling? And if I can't access the particular tools or policy or funding, then where does that leave me as a citizen? So that's the kind of macro infrastructure thing, you know, and it's so, the thing is when you look at how other countries do it, they get it. You know, you have a skills fund in Singapore, you have a learning passport in Denmark, all funded, so you have agency. You understand what you need to do in order to get access to that new learning. We don't seem to be able to do that because of perhaps an ideological fix on the market. But that requires resources from who? So that's one level of infrastructure. The other part that I want to talk about is really at an organization level. I'm going to pull it right back into learning and development in organizations. And you talked about it slightly, where we talked about having facilitators, digital facilitators within organizations whose sole function is to migrate people from analog to digital. And unless you have these hand-holding, safe spaces, safe people to work with, who exactly are you going to talk to upskill digitally? Who? You know, if you want to, like if I want to learn about Power BI, I can learn it online, yes. But within the organization, if that's not my day-to-day job, but I want to know about it, how do I go about it within the kind of learning development process? And one thing that we did find from our members was during COVID, organizations were very surprised at the human capital they had in-house. That when they said, we have this thing, we need to survive, we need to serve our customers, we need to do these things, we need to pull together, we need somebody to do this. People volunteered. And they used skills which were not on their JD. And in HR terms, if it's not in your JD, you ain't got it. Right? So that's the way that human capital is measured. And they found that that was a big surprise that all these people had other skills, other knowledges that they could apply during a crisis and pull together. So what that showed was that organizations are siloed. Organizations actually have no idea about the human capital that they have in-house. They have not done a skills audit in decades. You know, the only time you usually know about it is when somebody applies for a job or applies for a promotion. And so how do you do workforce planning? How? If you actually don't know the sum total of human capital. So in terms of infrastructure, one, you better have a good skills audit, you know, and know what that audit is for in a way that's trusting, that engenders trust and is transparent. So that it's not a process for redundancy, which it often is. So you start with that. And then you in workforce planning, you need a lot of human capital data. And human capital data is crunched by AI. So you need to know how that technology works when you make decisions about people's deployment, positioning, and role. Are they exiting? Are they moving across? Are they going down, up? So there's a lot of infrastructure too within organizations that needs to be built up so the transition within the organization, in and out of the organization, is fair. and people know where the gaps are. I can't get this new job which I apply for because I like this skill, but I'm going to get this training, and I know how it's going to be funded, and what's at the other end of my training, what's the deal. We need online facilitators, digital facilitators, to help people make that first step into a digital world. You have to have a view about your business strategy, what future skills you need, in order to make the investment in your strategic workforce planning pay. So some of the things that have come up are actually applied to the organizers. So you need voice. You need to listen to the voice. You need to understand outcomes and measurement, but you also need evidence to make those transitions. So at an org level, I think that's...
So lots of things are happening at this point. We are going to have to cut the conversation. I did promise that we'd have one question. So it's a quick question, hopefully quick question, very quick question, rapid fire answers, and then we'll close. Say your name and your question.
Thanks. It's not really a quick question. So
Took yourself out of it.
I can speak quickly. So just to tie a few threads together. Obviously, Wilson, your point on infrastructure, yes, there's a supply side issue as well, but I guess speaking to Helen, your point at the beginning, like how do we create more demand in terms of engaging those communities who would benefit from this outreach work? And I guess just to call out a distinction within the skills conversation, we've been speaking predominantly about hard skills in terms of what have people done, what are they capable of doing in terms of experience. But there's another side to that, which I think David alluded to, which was specifically critical thinking and all of the soft skills that people are bringing. And there's a movement in recruitment to shift away from perishable hard skills, which are obviously lasting less and less time as the rate of technological advancement gets quicker and quicker, and looking more at innate soft skills to broaden and diversify talent pools. So I guess my question is just whether there's a point there about building agency by kind of shifting the conversation towards traits and qualities as a way of engaging previously marginalised groups. So for example, instead of saying like, you can learn how to code, you can harness your curiosity and drive to further your life outcomes, something like that. And I guess that kind of speaks to your point, Wilson, as well about human capital. Why companies don't know what they have on offer and on tap, because maybe they're looking at it in terms of what people could already do, rather than looking at future potential. So I just wondered if there's a point in there for...
I'm going to leave that as a challenge to the room. What I will say, because I'm the person in charge, is that at Stimets we call them core skills and technical skills, because this whole hard-soft thing has kind of implied a bit of a hierarchy and a better than and a versus that is not necessary. So what are we doing to untap and understand those core skills, how they relate, how they allow us to have growth, and how do we empower those who are in the workforce and not yet in the workforce to grow and not be left behind in this fourth industrial revolution. A big thank you to my panel, thank you to you as the audience as well. Enjoy the next session.